Day seems to be one of those things that comes out of a human need and therefore isn't like a cute, tidy narrative. It's definitely immediately after the Civil War. It's definitely a whole bunch of people were grieving and confused about how to show up for this. And we see it manifest in like two or three different ways that eventually after World War I and after World War II become a cohesive narrative of Memorial Day in the United States is about celebrating United States veterans who have given their lives, and more generally about remembering the ancestors in our worlds, right? The first Memorial Day celebration, essentially, that is marked is actually in Charleston, South Carolina, in May of 1865, which is literally like weeks after the ending of the Civil War. There's this racetrack in Charleston, and the racetrack has been turned into a prison encampment during the war. And Union soldiers were being essentially housed there in this open air prison. And about 260 of them have passed away from disease, malnutrition, exposure, etc. during this process. They were being held in, being placed in a mass grave at this racetrack. And immediately following, Black people who had just been freed by the Civil War went to this gravesite and exhumed all of the Union soldiers and created a proper cemetery there with every Union soldier having their own marking and a proper fence. And it said, "The Martyrs of the Racetrack" above the cemetery. That's the first. And then they had a parade, right? Then they had a big celebration honoring specifically these soldiers and perhaps the entirety of the Union soldiers. And that's the first of what is essentially part of like Decorations Day. At the same time, in the next few years, we have things called Memorial Day and Decorations Day popping up across the United States. In Illinois and Indiana, you have Memorial or Decorations Day being about the Union soldiers. There's this case in Indiana where there's a little girl named Jenny Vernon whose father was a Union soldier. And on one of the Memorial Days, she sends a wreath to the local cemetery and asks that it be placed on a rebel soldier's grave because she's hoping that somebody down south in Georgia would be kind enough to place flowers on her father's grave that she can't possibly get to, because so many of these graves were so far away from family of origin, right? So that's 1868, and we have that. Decorations Day in the South continued to be a day that Black people in the South would clean and put flowers on Union soldiers' graves. And then there was this parallel Confederate Memorial Day that was about celebrating Confederate soldiers in the South, separate from probably this larger kind of national Union soldiers thing. And there's real complexity for a long time over what this is and who's being celebrated and how are we going to do this and how are we going to move forward as a country. And then World War I happens and there's a clear us versus them outsider thing again. And veterans in that are much clearer. And then in World War II, and then in 1971, I think, is when it's declared a federal holiday. So up until then, it was kind of this like individual, local, state sort of effort. And after that, it becomes clearly this is about veterans in conflict who have given their lives. And that's Memorial Day.